Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm Daniel King, and I'm excited about telling people about Jesus. Today I have a very special guest with me, York Moore. Thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about evangelism. How did you get started doing evangelism?
Well, I was saved as an atheist. I went to the greatest university in America, the University of Michigan, go Blue. And when I went to Michigan, my nickname in my fraternity was Satan. Wrote papers against Christians, persecuted Christians. And then I became one, which is we could have a whole other episode on just that. And when I became a Christian, I became just convinced that every single person around me needed to know the saving message of the gospel. And I was dangerous. In fact, I would say that my first people that I would share the Lord with, they were my first evangelism victims. And I didn't know what I was doing. And so just sharing Christ on campus, I started sharing Christ with professors, with students, started a ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ at the time before going on staff at the university. And now I'm the president of the Coalition for Christian Outreach. But in those early days, it was just infectious. Like I would literally come home from campus with my tongue swollen because I could not stop talking about Jesus. Now, Daniel, I'll tell you, I didn't know that I was actually doing evangelism. I didn't know that word. I was just telling everybody what Jesus had done for me. I didn't even fully understand the gospel.
And you have been sharing the gospel a lot on TikTok, and you've had absolutely phenomenal success. What have you seen God do on TikTok?
It's been incredible. I started a year ago, almost to the day, so July of 2021, and went on TikTok. I was so tired of waiting for live audiences to come back. And a friend of mine convinced me to start preaching on TikTok. And I, like my first days as an evangelist, I had no idea what I was doing. I was dangerous. But immediately I began to see the impact and the organic reach. And so it's been a little under a year now. I have over 400,000 followers. I have 100 million plus views across my library. But most importantly, I have 200,000 people who have indicated their first-time decision for Christ. And what's interesting is a lot of people will wonder, well, can a 45-second video really change somebody's life? The answer is yes. But most of those people whose lives are being impacted, they're not watching one video. They'll be featured in my videos through the algorithm. The For You page will push it to the account, and they'll end up watching dozens and dozens and dozens of my videos. In fact, I like to say most of the kids that are getting saved through my TikTok channel, by the time they've watched me for a couple of months, they will have more theology than had they been in a youth group in person for an entire year.
What was it that really encouraged you to start using TikTok?
Well, like I said, I was just so sick and tired of COVID. I was waiting for COVID to be over. And I'm just dying to get back on that platform, that podium, wherever I could, to preach Christ. You know as well as I do, there's something electric and intoxicating, standing in that moment, where you're giving that call to faith, seeing people's lives change, and the Spirit of God stick in the word, and you just know eternity is pressing on human hearts. And I just couldn't wait to get back to that. So I said, I'm desperate. And so I was on a live stream with a guy named Brian Barcelona. He's a young guy, founder of One Voice Ministries, and he was talking about TikTok. And I had been following him on Instagram. I was pretty excited about him. And I said, hey, Brian, I'm going to fly down to Texas and take you out for brisket. So I flew down here and took him out for lunch. And in the course of that lunch, he convinced me that I needed to be on TikTok. I said, I'm too old. I'm in my 50s. I'm unfamiliar with the app. He said, don't worry, all you need to do is be willing. So I flew back home, we set up a Zoom, and within probably 30 minutes, I recorded my very first TikTok. I had over 2,000 views. Now I'm seeing, many over 100, 200, 500,000 views. But what was most important to me is the comments. And I got into the comments, I would hear kids say things like, this has changed my life forever. I had no idea who Jesus was. I'd never heard this before. And they would say things, even this morning, I had probably a dozen or so comments like this. They would say, you've changed my life. I never knew about Jesus. This week I'm getting baptized. I got my first Bible. I joined a church. And these are things that, before a year ago, I would never conceive of being possible through a social media platform. But TikTok has changed it.
I think this is such an amazing way to reach out to people. Young people spend so much time on their phones. I've got a 12-year-old. He is always asking me, Daddy, can I have your phone? He wants to spend time looking at videos and seeing fun stuff. And so everyone's that's under like 20 is on TikTok. It's now all the older grandmas that are still on Facebook. Everyone else has moved over to these other platforms, and you're there ministering to people who need Jesus. And evangelists often are looking for a platform. They're looking for a crowd of people. And here you are every single day. You're preaching to thousands and thousands of people. I mean, how far would most evangelists fly to preach to 500,000 people? And here you do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think about that every morning. I didn't have to get on a plane. I didn't have to sit in a crummy hotel. I didn't have to hope the crowd showed up. I write my TikToks for an imaginary kid that lives in my brain. I call him Nick. He's a 14-year-old kid. He's addicted to porn. He's socially, he's acceptable. But he has problems at home. He doesn't know so much, but he's open. And I think that persona, it does typify the Gen Z students that we're seeing coming onto our college campuses. Like I said, I'm the president of the Coalition for Christian Outreach, and we are welcoming Gen Z. I like to say that Gen Z is the most available generation in American history. In fact, I believe that we're on the precipice of the greatest evangelistic opportunity in American history. I really believe that. And I think one of the reasons why is that this is the most available generation. They don't come with the same religious baggage and trauma that the Gen Xers and the millennials did. They don't come in with all of the demands and requirements of millennials. The millennial generation was a very difficult generation. When we were in campus ministry and university with them, though, we had great success. And I think that we're going to have even more with Gen Z. So when I write that TikTok for 14-year-old Nick, in my mind, he's in the backseat of his mom's SUV. He's on his way to soccer practice or some after-school kind of deal, and I have a few minutes with him. And I'm speaking directly to him, 6 to 8 inches from his face. I didn't have to get a permit. I didn't have to visit his school. I had this intimate moment with him. And the Knicks of this world, they're responding. TikTok is very different than the other social media platforms. In fact, it's now surpassed YouTube as the most watched app. It has in-app watched at the time. It has caused Facebook or Meta to now change Instagram and create Reels. YouTube has created Shorts. And those are responses to this algorithm-based technology that TikTok has really created. And for me, as kind of just an individual, it's unheard of in the social media space. Without a publicist, without engagement, without big dollars for production, I can go on TikTok and I can actually grow a community, care for that community, and have a very large influence. And that's every evangelist's dream.
Let's talk a little bit about the content. A lot of the videos that do well on TikTok is funny dance moves. Do you do funny dance moves, or what are you talking about? What is the questions that you're answering that is giving your audience something to stop and to watch this avatar, Nick?
Yeah, so before TikTok existed, there was a company called Music, and they made their fame through trending dance videos, voiceovers, those kinds of things. If you haven't been on TikTok lately, the whole thing has changed. It is now the new YouTube. You can learn how to garden, you can learn how to cook, you can learn how to travel. Everything that you can imagine is on TikTok. There's a niche for anything that you can imagine on TikTok. And so what I'm teaching is very basic Bible doctrine. So I teach about sin, judgment, righteousness, the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. These are things that you and I, we kind of take for granted. And there is a hunger in this generation. Once they start actually putting the pieces of the story of God together and applying it to their lives, it's electric. It makes sense. It connects with everything that they were hoping for and longing for, and no one's been able to put their finger on it. Nobody's been able to tell them the kinds of things that I'm telling them on TikTok. Here's the thing. I do preach a lot on hell, the lake of fire. I talk about Satan quite a bit. I talk about pornography all the time. And, if you were to go to my TikTok channel, which is just York.more, what you would see is a very kind of clickbaity appearing of hell. But once you start watching the content and you get past the first 7 seconds of each video, what I'm actually doing is preaching the gospel and teaching very basic Bible content and applying it to their lives. The number one response that I get, especially from the videos on hell and damnation, is thank you. So many kids are telling me, you know what, this now makes sense. I never understood the Christian message because it just didn't make sense. I didn't understand why Jesus had to die and why I had to be forgiven my sin. Because there were no consequences for it. And when we preach the judgment of God, when we preach the wrath of God, it actually makes the entire message make sense. But we have been raised in the United States for the last 20 years to put that in the broom closet, to save that for another day, right? Don't preach the wrath of God. That's going to turn people away. And this is the very thing that I base my account on. This is probably around 50% of what I preach on is the wrath of God. And it's leading many, many people to Christ.
Now, one of the things that makes TikTok videos be popular is the algorithm behind the software. And so, can you tell me some of the things that you've learned that help you to work with the algorithm so that it knows that people want to listen to your videos?
Yeah, sure. And again, we can have a whole hour on this, but I would say the number one thing, the first and foremost thing the algorithm is looking for is consistency. And the algorithm rely on you to provide consistent quality content for an audience that it knows it has for your content. So if I'm posting once a week, twice a week, 5 times a week, the algorithm says, here's an account, it's occasionally good to me, I might reward it with a jackpot every now and then. But if you post 3 times, 5 times a day, we're only talking about 45 to 30 second videos. The algorithm says, well, here's an account that I can rely on to push consistent quality content to an audience that I already know exists. That's number one. Number two, the algorithm is looking for one thing and one thing only, and that's watch time. The algorithm only wants to keep people eyeballs on the app. You don't want to migrate people to Zoom. You don't want to say to your audience, check my Instagram. It doesn't want any of that. If you can keep your audience engaged in the TikTok app, it's going to reward your account more than most. The third thing is it does have to have a hook. I see so much good content on TikTok, and people are assuming that it operates the same as YouTube, as Instagram. The expectation for a video, if you're not hooking your audience in the first 3 seconds of your video, you've lost them. They're just going to scroll. And so you've got to do something in those first 3 seconds that's really going to captivate the imagination and incentivize that person to watch, because there is an equation behind this for the algorithm. The algorithm is looking for shares, likes, comments, and follows. And there's an equation that puts together to say this video is actually going to do well. It tests it with this 100 people, and this 1,000 people, and this 10,000 people. And that's how videos actually go viral. It's not because you made a good piece of content. You can make the very best video in the world. If you're not getting consistent quality content to the algorithm, it's not going to take a risk on it. You can make a great piece of content, but if it doesn't have a hook, it's not going to be watched by an audience. But once the algorithm says, if this has a universal appeal, it's done well with the smaller audience. I've watched videos go 500, 800,000 all over the world outside the United States. So it first, focuses on the United States, and then it pushes it across the world if it has success. That's not every video. I mean, many of my videos, they fail. And I'll tell you this, a failure on TikTok is a wild success on Instagram. If you have 5,000 views on your Instagram, reel, you think, oh, it's a good day. And you know what Instagram says? You did pretty good. You'd do it better if you gave us some more money. TikTok isn't asking for money. In fact, they give you money, right? And so that's not why I'm doing it. But the reality is, the really organic reach on TikTok, it's unlike anything that we've seen. In fact, I'd say that this is perhaps the greatest opportunity for the gospel since radio and television. It's almost like when we went from the BlackBerry as the epitome of the smartphone to the iPhone. That's what's happening. So a lot of people are making the mistake that TikTok is just the next social media platform. It's not. It's like going from the BlackBerry to the iPhone.
What's different about it than other social media sites?
The algorithm itself. In fact, you might remember when President Donald Trump threatened to ban TikTok in the United States. Why would he do that, right? Part of the reason why he did that is we have military-grade artificial intelligence that had collected data on American citizens, banking information. When I get paid from TikTok, I have to give them a W-2. They have my social security number. They have my routing number. All of that money was going over to China. It was being stored on Chinese servers. And Trump said, look, this can't continue. So we have American investors. We have Walmart, we have Cisco, we have American investors. So now our data actually remains on the U.S. shores. Why was that so important? It was important because the algorithm itself is a proprietary piece of technology that has never existed before. People are trying to replicate it, they're trying to mimic it, but there is nothing on earth like the TikTok algorithm.
And it's so wonderful that you are able to use it as a tool for the gospel. What a tremendous benefit that is. Now, you are not just a TikTok star. You also lead a wonderful Christian ministry. Can you tell me some about what your ministry does? You just recently took over as president, and you have big vision. What's coming in the future?
Yeah, so it's the Coalition for Christian Outreach. It's been around since 1972, so 50 years. We celebrated our 50-year anniversary just recently, and we're growing nationally. And so the big difference between the Coalition for Christian Outreach and many other great, fantastic organizations that do college ministries, that we partner with the local church. And so when we place a staff to reach a campus for Christ, that person is shared by the local church, they're part of the staff of the local church, and we're reaching the campus through the local church. Based in Pittsburgh, but we're expanding all throughout the country. So if you're listening, you're a pastor, you're a church leader, we'd love to talk to you about partnering together to reach the church, reach the campus for Christ.
Okay, so if someone wants to follow you on TikTok, how do they follow you on TikTok?
It's just York.org.
So York.org, go follow him, see his content, see what is impacting so many lives. And then if someone wants to find out more about the ministry that you're now leading, how can they find out more about that?
Yeah, CCOGE, or you can Google the Coalition for Christian Outreach.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I am so honored to be with you. The ministry that you're doing through TikTok is just so amazing, and I believe that God is going to bring many, many young people into the kingdom of God because of your ministry. So thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast.
Daniel King is on a mission to save 1 million souls a year, but he can't do it alone. Would you consider sowing a financial seed today? To give, please visit www.kingministries.com.